you really have to stop thinking about it as a test of who you are as a clinician. Hello everyone, welcome to the Franny Pack. I am Francesca, if you haven't watched any of my videos before, and you know that this video, just by the thumbnail, is going to be about the Praxis exam, specifically my experiences with the most recent Praxis exam, which I took in 2021, and that was during the pandemic. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit about how I had to make adjustments in studying and test taking for that. I really don't like exams. Like, why do I have to take this? And it's actually really important that you take it. Well, for us, at University of Buffalo, we have to take it in order to graduate, but you're gonna need to take it anyways if you plan on being a practicing speech-language pathologist. The requirements are gonna differ from state to state, so I'm going to share specifically the requirements for New York State and that my university holds for us that we need to stick by. So the exam itself is 132 multiple choice questions. That is so important because when I was studying in the Praxis practice book, that is a mouthful, Praxis practice book, it has like essay questions on there, and that threw me for a loop because at that point I was very early on in my studying. I hope I'm going to be able to finish the exam on time if there's multiple choice, short answer, essay questions, but don't worry, it's all multiple choice. And you get 180 minutes to complete it, which is 3 hours. And I found that I didn't even need the full time. And I even went back and looked at every question at least once, and I didn't need the full time. But some people do take the entire amount of time, and you can also request accommodations as well, which is really nice. I would definitely plan on doing that earlier than later because it does take time to get approved. I hadn't gotten it done, but just being in different group chats, people did say it took a little bit longer for their accommodations to be met. So it's really important if you do know you're going to need accommodations, get the paperwork done way in advance, like weeks in advance before you take your exam. There are 3 categories: foundations and professional practice. The second is screening, assessment, evaluation, and diagnosis. So don't mind me, I'm looking at my notes just so I don't get it wrong. And then the third category is planning, implementation, and evaluation of treatment. So as you can see with the foundations portion of the exam, it's going to be a lot of what you've learned in class, just very straightforward facts. And then there's some other parts of the exam that are not so easy to study for, and that's more of the clinical judgment aspect. Some of these scenarios that they gave, these case examples, would be so much easier if I had had that experience in the clinic. But I'm going to be answering later on in my Q&A about how we had to change our clinical practicum based on the pandemic. So we did a lot more simulated hours, not so much real life cases. And we did still get a lot of real life experience, but I do think that the real life experience really helps you in studying for the Praxis. The questions are randomized, so it's not going to be like dysarthria, dysphagia, autism, child apraxia of speech. And it's not like that at all. It's just like you get a random bunch of questions and you just have to take it one by one. Sometimes you'll have like a paragraph to read and answer a few questions based off of that, but for the most part, it's all very random. New York State and my university requires a standard score of at least 162. That's as of 2021. So it could change a year from now, 2 years from now. Also, it's really important to note that wrong questions don't count against you. So if you don't know something, don't leave it blank. Please don't leave it blank. You have to just answer it, give it your best shot. You can come back to it later. It accumulates all of your correct answers throughout the entire exam, and the wrong answers don't count against you. They just don't count at all. So if you're not sure about something, and trust me, you will come across at least a couple questions you're not sure of, just give it your best guess. The way you sign up for this exam is on the Educational Testing Service website, ETS. That's the same site that you signed up for your GRE on. And there's a lot of other exams that are on there that are well known. but that is where you would sign up for your test. And you should also know where you need to send your scores. The best way to find that information out is just go right to your department. Hopefully they would have told you already, but it's good to have that reminder of where exactly do I need to send my scores to? Is there a professional office that I need to send it to? Do I need to send it to ASHA? Do I need to send it to my university? So make sure you have all that information as you're going to sign up for your exam. Okay, the big question of when to take it. So this is going to depend on your program. So University of Buffalo made us take it before we graduate. Some programs are not like that, and they allow you to take it anytime during your CF year, which is your clinical fellowship year. I decided to take it early in my spring semester. I was originally planning to do it over winter break. I postponed it because I realized I needed more time to study. You have to plan it when it's a good time for yourself. You know yourself better than anyone else. I would just suggest planning it far enough in the future so you have time to study, but not too far, because if you have to retake it for any reason, you want to have enough time to retake it and get your scores. It does take about a month to get your scores back. Oh, also, I would suggest taking it after you're done with your courses, your course curriculum, because it will cover everything back from even as an undergraduate student. So it's really good to keep your notes, study from your notes. I'll talk about study preparation later, but I would suggest taking it once you're completed with your coursework. So preparing during a pandemic was a little tricky for a couple of reasons. First, to take the test, I took the test at home. I didn't go to a testing center to take it. I took it remote, and I made sure to test all my technology first. So it had me download some software. I had to make sure that worked before the test date. I checked it, I think, the day before or 2 days before. That's really all you need. Unless you have problems, you can have time to contact them. I had to rearrange my room. You can't have anything underneath your desk, anything around you. And when I was about to take the test, the proctor had me move my desk around so that they could see the entrance to this room that I'm in. So they can see if anyone's gonna come in with like a sign with all the answers or like a cheat sheet. They wanted to make sure that it was going to be a controlled environment. So just be aware for that. Have time, plan time to get onto your session early so that you can make those adjustments if you need to. They do allow you to have something to write on, like some type of scrap paper or a whiteboard if you need it. And just make sure that you're testing in a quiet environment. I think the loudest one in my house, other than myself, is my cat. And I asked my boyfriend to keep him shut in our room so that he didn't bother me during the test, because he can like try to jump on my lap and stuff. He gets really affectionate and needy. And like if you have a dog, it's the same. Like if you have any pets or kids, just be aware that you're gonna really just wanna focus for 3+ hours. Try to close off your environment as much as possible, or try to schedule on a day where you know no one's gonna be home. Another thing that made the test tricky during the pandemic for me personally, this is a me problem, but I mean, I'm sure maybe there's other people who also relate. I used to say I'm not a great test taker. I've improved with test taking immensely, but I'm not a great memorizer, so it takes a lot of work for me to remember things, especially if I don't have hands-on experience with these things. During the pandemic, everything is basically open notes. A lot of my exams were. So I had access to my notes, to my textbook, to the internet for a lot of my projects, exams, tests, and it helped me flourish. Like I had great grades. The problem is the Praxis is not open notes test. So everything that's on there you have to know by heart. And of course, like our field is so broad, they don't expect you to be an expert in everything. Like that would be it would be nearly impossible with the level that you're at as a newer clinician. Study as much as you can. It was something that I had to get used to, especially during the practice exams that I took, of just not referring to my notes, really having to internalize some of the answers and understand why they were the correct answer versus the foil in the question. I constantly fall for the foils. It wasn't even a case of I didn't know a lot of the questions. It was just falling for the next best answer. So really understanding why that next best answer is not true, and you really have to understand why the true answer is true. It sounds so duh, but it can make a big difference in your scores. As far as preparation materials, I wanted to spend the least money possible while still getting a quality experience out of all the preparation I did and doing the best I could. If you've looked at some of the practice books online, they can run over $100. It's actually rare to find one that's under $100. And for me, it was kind of ridiculous. I just didn't, not that I didn't want to spend that money on a book, because I definitely have for classes, but I knew that there had to be other ways to find a cheap book that I can use to practice with. My boyfriend actually had a really great idea about checking our school library system, and we looked and we found one. It was an older edition. That was the first thing I used to prepare with, and it worked great. Like, it had so much information on there that is still relevant to today. And even though it's 10 years old, there has been some updates and some changes, and that's where I used my notes to fill in some of those gaps. And then I also took some practice exams as well, which really helped me understand what type of questions they're going to ask and what were the things I really did need to focus on. So in the entire practice book, I went through every chapter. Some of them I went through more thoroughly than others, just based on what I knew and didn't know. And then for practice exams and questions, there's a lot of just free practice questions online, but they're not full exams. And I think it's really important to practice the full exam, specifically from the Praxis website. Another website I used was called TrueLearn, and a friend sent me the link to that, and they gave me 50 questions. So it wasn't the full 132 question test, but it was 50 questions, and it was still good to get a feel for the timing of things, still good to get a feel for the breadth of questions that might be asked. And it also gave you explanations of why you got certain questions wrong, which I appreciate. As far as the Praxis practice exams go, I bought a bundle of 2. You can buy a bundle of 3. I just thought that was too excessive, and for the money, it didn't make sense to me. I just bought the bundle of 2. It was about $30 for 2 exams, and I took one each week leading up to the actual test. It's really getting in the habit of taking that long of a test. I would say usually by the 100th question, I was feeling kind of fried because I was really focusing so hard. But that practice that I had with those questions really helped me when it came to the test itself, because I was like, okay, we got this. Like, this is piece of cake almost. But I did find that some of the practice questions I had were a little bit harder than the actual test I had. I think that was just by the stroke of luck. It was a miracle, thank God, that the actual Praxis exam wasn't as hard as the practice test I took. But just so you know, the practice tests are tests that were given previously, and it's just that they change the exam every so often, so it's not the same test. So this test that you're taking and you pay for has been taken by other students in the past. There was a couple really hard ones in the practice exams I even brought to my supervisor, because I was like, I have no idea. I feel so dumb right now. And then they were like, ooh, this is a really tough question. So you do get asked really tough questions that even professionals in the field who have been working for 10 plus years might have to think twice about. And so it's really important to have patience with yourself and grace with yourself in knowing that you're not going to know everything. And like I said earlier, if you don't know, just give it your best guess. Like, that is one of the key components to success during this test, is just trying your best, persevering through it. Another thing that I think really helps if you're going to take practice exams is sitting down and looking through those answers thoroughly. I made, I think, 10 plus pages of notes from all the questions that I got wrong, and even the ones that I did get right, just because I needed to have a refresher later on. I wrote down not even the question itself, but just the topic, information surrounding the topic. If I got the question wrong, I would I would write down what the correct answer was and why it was, and that really helped me in studying the day of too. Now, for during the test, I took it at a time where I knew I was going to be alert, I wouldn't be too tired, and it wouldn't be too early or too late. I drank a lot of coffee and water that day. You are allowed to have one break, but I made sure just to drink enough coffee and water so I wouldn't need a break because I just wanted to take it all the way through. Make sure you sleep the day before and sleep enough. Whatever the amount that is for you. For me, it's around, I feel best around 6 or 7 hours. So it just depends on how you run. You know yourself best. It's really important to prepare as much as possible, preparing your environment before the test so that you don't have to even worry about it the day of. If you're the type of person that needs to meditate, to pray, to really just be centered before taking the test, I definitely suggest doing that. I had to do that as well. I mean, I always do before a big exam. I noticed for me, during the exam, the first 10 questions, my mind was racing. By the 10th or 15th question, I was starting to relax more, really starting to get into the flow of the test. And then by the 100th question, I was really tired. But it helped having all the practice beforehand because otherwise I think I would have gotten tired way sooner. By the 120th question, I started getting excited. I was like, wow, I'm seeing the finish line. And actually a little bit anxious too, because I was like, I wonder what my score is going to be. But it does give you the score afterwards. It showed me my scaled score and my raw score. Unfortunately, I was just kind of burned out by that point that I saw it and it made sense to me. But the following day, I was like, did I really just pass? I think I passed. And I remember texting my mom and telling my supervisors, I was like, I think I passed. It showed me this score and I think I'm good. But I just needed that extra confirmation in an email or online that I can refer to officially. And you won't get that for about a month. So I'm going to be listing all of the links and resources that I used in the description down below, so that hopefully you can get some use out of them too, or just to help you figure out what you're going to need to do and prepare for your Praxis exam. But I think it's so important that I talk about just a couple of mindset things when going into this test. You really have to stop thinking about it as a test of who. If you don't know answers to some questions, that is perfectly normal. Like, that is expected, okay? Like, don't be too hard on yourself. I know in our field, a lot of people are what is considered type A personalities, like very organized, very structured, and that's great. But sometimes those same people end up being very hard on themselves when something's not working out the way they planned. And I just want to assure you that it's okay to be wrong sometimes. You just have to keep learning from that. And I definitely saw some growth from the first practice set of questions I took to the test. Like, I definitely improved. And the only way I really improved was just I kept learning. I kept writing down the questions I got wrong. I didn't get too hung up about them. I did get a little anxious here and there, like, I hope I pass. But I mean, that feeling's normal and it's okay. Don't see this as a test of what you lack. See it as a test of what you know as a clinician. People underestimate themselves so much. I've met there's so many really amazing clinicians that are in the graduate program right now from UB. It's so incredible to see how they underestimate their knowledge and their clinical judgment. And this test is not a test of how good you are as a clinician at all. It's just kind of a baseline that ASHA needs so that they know that you're ready. But definitely don't think that this is a test that's going to be the end all of your career. There's some people who do have to retake it. And that's okay too. Hopefully that won't be you after watching this video, but it happens, and you have to be really accepting of yourself and be very understanding of where you're at. And overall, other than just being very patient with yourself, keep persevering through some of those tough moments. And just wrapping up, other than all the prepping and planning tips that I gave you, is just really be confident in what you know. You know more than you think you do, and double check your work. Follow your gut instinct on a lot of these questions. If you didn't get as high as you wanted to, or if there were a set of tough questions on a topic that you haven't had a lot of experience with, it happens to all of us. You just have to know that if you give it your best, you will be okay. And you're going to be learning so much more after this too, once you're in the field. If you learned anything from this video, or if you wanted to share your own tips, just drop them down in the comments below. Please like and subscribe. I will see you all next Friday.